Are you tired of spending countless hours working on reports? Are you wondering how to harness the power of Power Automate? In this video, we're going to start with an Excel spreadsheet. We're going to sort by individual products. We're going to sum the totals for each of those products. Let an AI prompt analyze that data. It'll be sent to the manager, who will decide whether or not to order new parts based off of that analysis. Along the way, we're going to cover practical tips, step-by-step techniques, and troubleshooting strategies. If this sounds like you, buckle up. My bonus tip is at the end. You don't want to miss it. Let's get started. All right, let's get started. So, as you can see, we're on the Power Automate page. And so we're going to go to My Flows, New Flow, and we're going to do a scheduled flow this time. And we're going to set it to run once a week at 7 o'clock on Monday mornings. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to tell Power Automate what the start date is. To do that, we're just going to add a simple date add function. And so we're going to say minus UTC now, which is just going to be today's date minus 7 days. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the Excel list rows in a table format. If you look at our Excel table, you'll see that we have a date column that we can filter off of. And so when you use the columns in Excel, it's just going to be the column name that you're going to use as the schema. So date greater than, and then single parentheses, encapsulating, and then we're going to use the outputs of today minus 7. So we want the last 7 days from today. And we got an error. So if we look at this error, first of all, at the top, it says invalid filter clause, unsupported action, only single equals, not equals, contains, starts with, or ends with is supported. So the Excel connector does not support a greater than term in the filter. So we can't use greater than in the inside of Excel. We're going to have to pull that filter outside of the filter. So if we look at what Copilot is saying, Copilot's pretty much saying the same thing. So okay, locate the list rows present in a table action, and then your list rows, your filter query, your date column, it cannot be in a greater than specific date format. So that is a limitation to Excel. It's one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of using Excel, but Excel is a very simple tool to use. A lot of people use Excel. A lot of people put data into Excel. And so for the purposes of this flow, I wanted to show that you can use Excel with Power Automate to build a report like this. So if you look on this list, the date column isn't there. But if we click on the See More, now we can see our date. So we select date is equal to, we want is greater than, and then we're still going to use the compose statement from before. All right, successful test. If we look at our report, it says we got 125 records here, and then we got 125 records here. So our filter didn't do what we wanted it to do. Why didn't our filter do what it wanted it to do? Well, so if we go and look at our list rows, so Excel doesn't show dates in a date format by default. We have to tell it that we want it in a date format using the ISO 8601. Once again, the number of rows from Excel is 125, but the number of rows at the output of the filter is 42. All right, great. That's exactly what we wanted to see. Moving on. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to find all of the SKUs that were used during the current date period. To do this, we're going to use the distinct functionality. Now, there isn't actually a distinct function in Power Automate. Instead, what we're going to have to do is use a union, and then we're going to use a table format and compare two tables to each other, and that union is going to mash those two tables together, and it'll only take the individual remaining items from the mashup of those two tables, and that's how we're going to get a distinct. Now, it's important to understand that if we go and we look at the items that are available to us to select, we're not going to see the SKU that we want, right? If we try to select this, it's going to create an apply to each because we've already selected the body of the filter, and so it's thinking that we want to use the SKU from the Excel, and that's not really what we want. We want the SKU from the filter. So how do you get that SKU? Well, we already know what the schema for that SKU is, right? Because if we look at this column name, it's just SKU. So if we come here and we look at our items, use our format, it's going to be item and then inside of the single parentheses we put the schema for what we're looking for. In this case, SKU. All that this is saying is that the item refers to the larger step that you're in. In this case, it's a select step. And the body of this select step is going to say, I want all of the SKU items from this body. Now, don't get confused. It does show up as an Excel here, but you notice that it did not punt us into an apply to each. And if we look at our schema, it is still showing item, so we're still good to go. Okay, so like I said, we're going to take a union of two tables. In this case, the tables are the output of the select, and then we're just going to take the output of the select again. And so we're going to compare those two tables together, and we're going to find all of the items that are the same between those two tables. Let's go ahead and test this so that you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so if we look at the output of the select SKU, you can see that there's all 44 SKUs, and you can see that they duplicate each other. If we look at the output of the distinct, we can see that now we only have the individual SKUs in here. We don't have any duplicates remaining. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to build an apply to each for that distinct SKU. So the outputs of the distinct SKU is going to be what the apply to each. So each one of those SKUs that we have, it's going to look at each one and perform everything in this apply to each for each one of those SKUs. So the first thing that we need to do is get a filter for those distinct SKUs. So what are we starting with? Well, we need to start with the outputs of the filter by date. And it's not going to allow us to select the SKU that we want, right? But remember, we can create our own SKU items, right? So it's just item, SKU. Okay? And so that SKU is related to the body because, remember, it's the item that goes to the body. Now is equal to, now we're going to have to do, we want to relate this to the apply to each SKUs. So to do that, it's going to be items for the apply to each. In which column of the apply to each do we want? We want the SKU column. So we see 4, 5, 5, 3, 5. The next thing that we need to do is sum the records so that we know how much the SKU changed over the course of the week. If we look at our inventory for SKU 1, we can see that over the course of last week, inventory changed by 75. But we need Power Automate to come to that same conclusion. All right, in this case, we want the quantity removed and the quantity added. So it would be quantity underscore removed and quantity underscore added. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up an XML node so that we can use an XPath expression to evaluate that node to determine the sum of the values. To do that, we're going to use a compose. This creates an XML node for the selected removed records. Alright, so to do this, we're going to need the XPath function. Which uses an XML node. And the XML node is just the outputs of what we just did. Next thing that we do is tell it what to do, which in this case is sum. And we use XPath nomenclature to tell it how to access the node. The first thing that you do is use a select to get the column of data that you need. Then you use that column of data to create an XML node with that data. And then you use an XPath function to pull that data out and to sum it up together. If you're interested in learning more about this, you can learn this and a lot more at W3 Schools, completely free. It's where I've learned most of my XPath functionality. All right, so going back 7 days from today, going back to the first, and the second is included, which I didn't include initially, so that would be 100 items removed. All right, I went ahead and added the same steps. I'm going to subtract the removed value from the added value. All right, so now we have our totals for the week for each SKU. Now we need to put those totals into our inventory tracker. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a row to the Excel worksheet. Now when we add a row to a table, we need to give it a unique identifier so we can figure out what it is later. To do that, we're going to use today's date. But as we previously discussed, we actually need to use it in a kind of a unique, different way. And Excel will not recognize that as a date. It'll work out perfectly for us. All right, now that we've created the row, now we need to add the totals for the SKU to that row. As our key column, we're going to use week of text, and our key value is today text. And we're going to use the SKU 1 total. You might be saying, Jeremy, this doesn't apply to each. It's going to go through each and every single one of those SKUs. It's not going to apply to SKU 1 every single time. And you're right. We're going to build a switch statement that is looking at which SKU is being treated to build out the rest of our expression. on the SKU. Is going to be SKU 001. And then we'll just move this up into here. We'll change this to 001. Okay, so now I've built out each one of these SKU actions, and it's just an update for each one. But each one is updating the individual SKU instead of updating SKU 1. Let's test this and see how it works. Okay, success. So the only thing that we need to do here is on our add a row, we need to actually add the week. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to list rows present in the totals table, making sure that we keep our ISO 8601 date time format. And we're going to go ahead and throw in. So what this is going to do is it's going to sort the records by the week of in the ascending order. Alright, so now we're going to put everything into a scope. First thing that we're going to do is get a select statement. And we're going to use the list rows of the totals. And we're just going to use a generic total value here. And then we're going to take the totals and we're going to reverse the order. So you might be asking, Jeremy, you just put them into ascending order. Why are we going to reverse the order now? Well, the Excel spreadsheet has a formula in it. And if you pull out the data in a descending order, then it's going to cause the data to be kind of wonky as far as what it looks like, right? And so we want it to come in as an ascending, but then we want to flip the data around, show only the descending values so that we can get the top 3 values easily. And finally, the step that everybody's been waiting for, drum roll please! This is the AI step. So we're going to use our AI builder, create text with GPT using a prompt, and we're going to use the prompt that was previously created. And I will add the link below to show you how I created this inventory report analyzer. And so the inventory report that it wants is just the first 3 totals from the reverse totals value. Okay, so to do this, we're going to use our expression analyzer. We're going to do the outputs of the reverse totals. We're going to get the first record, which is signified by 0. And we're going to get column total. Control A, Control C. Add that. Control V. Change that to a 1 for the second record. And then change it to a 2 for the third record. And so now we have the 3 records that the prompt requires. And of course we're doing this for SKU 001. Okay, and so then we can see from the output of the test that it was a successful test. And look at what our outputs were. Succeeded. SKU 1, sufficient inventory false, expected usage over 10 days is 125, current inventory is 125, right? So that makes sense. Alright, so we're going to package this up and send it to the manager so that they can review and approve it. Alright, so I'm back. I did add a condition that said if sufficient inventory exists, true, or if sufficient inventory exists, false. And if it's false, then it creates this really quick report for the manager to review. So it'll have the SKU, current inventory, and expected usage. I went ahead and replicated this across 3 different SKUs so that you could see exactly how this would work across the 3 different SKUs. Okay, now I've also got this Outlook function. I'm just going to enter my name and then low inventory report, and then the outputs for the insufficient inventory that we had. Okay, and so there you see it. We have our report. The manager can order new parts based off of this. My pro tip is if you're going to use the Excel connector, don't do what I did. I had create the Excel row, and then I had 10 different updates for the Excel row. That's silly, especially if you're going to start talking about a whole bunch, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 100 rows, 100 updates. You can't be making 100 updates to the same row over the course of 2-3 minutes. Okay. Instead, what you should do is create your own variable that has all of the data that you need in it for that update all together. And then after the apply to each is completed, you use that variable to update the Excel record all at the same time, just once. And that's how you build an AI inventory report. If you follow these steps, you won't go wrong. And like I said before, if you need to know how I built the AI builder step, you go to my other video and watch that video. If you're feeling overwhelmed by this, please reach out to Next Step Low Code Labs and we'll set up a time to go through this step by step to help you achieve your success. Please hit like, please hit subscribe.